my story, and you saw it firsthand, was seeing a lot of quote unquote ministry success, but for a season feeling really empty and feeling anxious and lost and confused that it didn't feel the way I thought it would feel. And God using me embracing discipline and rhythms to really create the space for Him to change my heart and my soul and to renew my joy. Welcome to Dreamers and Disciples. This is a very special episode for the podcast. This is episode 100. In fact, I recently was going through my 2022 prayer journal, and I found this entry from February 17th, 2022, where it said, I felt the Lord tell me to start a podcast. I've been praying for opportunities to teach, and this is one I could have every week. I think I will call it Dreamers and Disciples. So it's pretty cool to see something that started as a dream back then and to see what God has done over the last 100 episodes, little over 2 years. And I wanted to do something fun to celebrate 100 episodes. So I figured I would give the keys to the podcast today to my favorite person in the world, my wife, Ferris, Joye. She is going to interview me today. She really can do whatever she wants to. If she wants to teach, she can teach. Ferris, the floor is yours.
I will not be teaching. I wish I had a confetti cannon or something to be like, poof, we celebrating 100 episodes. It's very exciting. It's a big milestone, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
That's a lot. That's a lot of consistency. And I love that you had the journal entry. Like, that's cool to see that you even called it Dreamers and Disciples right in the journal before it even began. So very proud of you.
Well, thank you.
So I will interview you, and I'm a faithful listener, listen every week. And
you also make all the YouTube thumbnails.
I do.
Which sometimes can cause some marital strife, but that's for another podcast episode.
That's right. Yeah. Things we've learned in our marriage. But yeah, we're in this together. It's a team effort. You have 90% of the work, but I take maybe just like 2% of the work that I have. All right. So to kick things off, one of the things that you sometimes ask your people who come on that you interview is, what are you dreaming about? So I am going to throw that back at you. What is something that you're dreaming about, you're excited about, something you're pursuing, and let your listeners hear.
The tables are turned now.
This is a hard question.
No, I'm dreaming about a lot right now. I mean, there's so much with our family that I'm dreaming about. We just got to take our twins on their 16-year-old trip. At the time we're recording this, Sydney turns 12 tomorrow. So I think you and I are both dreaming about how to parent teenagers well and wanting them to continue to grow as just mature followers of Jesus. I think our girls are such a gift. I'm dreaming about our marriage and how we continue to keep that growing and healthy. I think we're dreaming about our 20th anniversary trip that we're starting to plan, which we celebrate 20 years in May, which is crazy. And then I'm thinking, I would say right now, ministry-wise, I'm dreaming a lot about what this podcast can become, because I'm really, really passionate about it in this season and seeing it continue to grow and change and us try things. But then also there's a program that I started this summer, at the end of this summer, called the Steadfast Way, to help men who are in ministry. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about that some more in this conversation, but I'm really, really excited about that and how a lot of the things that the Lord has done in my life over the last 3 to 4 years all seem to intersect in that one program. And so that's something I'm excited about, seeing men become more confident in their identity, more confident in what is most important in terms of their greatest calling. And then to see how when a man becomes healthier and more focused on their calling and how they lead themselves as a follower of Jesus, as a husband, as a father, I think that in turn makes the other things that they lead healthier, whether it's a church or a business or a nonprofit. I think all of that becomes much more fruitful when the inner world and the private practices of that man and their family is healthy.
Yeah, I love that. I am very excited about you doing this group with these men. And I've gotten to have a little taste of it that some of them came and visited our house recently. And that was so fun. And we have just a lot of fun talking about all of it. So we are going to talk about it more, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Before we get too far like into future stuff, I kind of do want to jump back a little bit. So I looked up, and your first episode was July of 2022. And so let's think back to your first episode. What's some things that maybe you've shifted now in your approach to the podcast now that you're 100 episodes in? Or is there something that you've just learned through having 100 episodes with having different interviews and different things that you've had to teach on? What's just kind of like, as you look at the whole of your podcast, something you've gleaned from that season?
Yeah, and it's so funny to like, I mean, to me, I think 100 episodes is worth celebrating, which is why we're doing this. But then I look at people who have 400 episodes, 500 episodes, 1,000 episodes, and realizing that we're still so early on in this journey and what it can be. But I will say the early lessons that I'm learning is I didn't expect when I started the podcast to enjoy interviewing people as much as I do. And I think like the first 20 episodes were me doing like many teachings, and I still do a decent amount of that. But I've really loved learning from other people and highlighting other people's dreams and their passions and what God is teaching them and the calling that God has on their life and the message God has given them to share. And I think that really falls in line with the whole dreamers and disciples theme of letting some different dreamers and disciples of Jesus, like giving them a platform to share what the Lord's put on their heart. And so I think one of the things I'm really passionate about is helping people not only clarify their calling and get a lot of more certainty around that, but then also I like helping people, I like pushing people forward. I guess that's the best way to say it. Whether it was, what I learned as a worship pastor or when I coach other teams now, one of the main things that I try to instill is that ministry is about helping other people flourish in their gift and pushing other people out front. And this podcast seems like a really fun way for me to do that. It doesn't always have to be about what God's teaching me. It can be about what God's teaching someone else. And then honestly, in this season, I also just want to learn from people. I want to learn from their perspective. I want to glean from their wisdom. And so selfishly, I just like having these conversations.
I love that. You mentioned in there, you were like, you coach, you do this podcast. You have a lot of hats that you wear. You wrote a book, you go out and preach sometimes. You're my husband, you're our kid's dad. So you consult. So there's a lot of things that you do. And I sometimes like people will ask me and I'm just like, he does so many things. And I'm like listing them off. So how do you balance all of those roles, but still stay true to what you feel like God is like pushing you forward to do? And do those things ever pull you in different directions? Or do you feel like you can kind of unite all of it together?
I think everyone feels like they're pulled in a lot of different directions. And I think if you say you don't feel that way, then you're probably not being truthful. And you see the messiness of all of it. But yeah, there are many times that even this summer, I took a lot of time off to pray and say, God, am I doing too much? Because I know the most important things are, family, how I lead you, how I lead the girls, how I show up, to what's most important. Obviously, my relationship with God over all things. But then when it comes to ministry, yeah, there are a lot of different things I'm passionate about and a lot of different things I'm excited about. And I was praying, I was like, God, is the podcast still something you want me to do? Is traveling and preaching still something you want me to do? Is consulting still something you want me to do? Is writing another book? All of that, trying to lay it on the table. And I think I posted this on Instagram. My birthday, we went out to Shake Shack. Do you remember this? And I felt like God spoke to me through a receipt, because it just, our number for the table, it said 48, which was how old I was turning that day. And it said stay. And when I looked down on it, down at that, I felt like it was the Holy Spirit saying, stay exactly where you are right now. You're doing what I've called you to do. Be faithful to that. And over the course of taking some time off this summer, I felt like the Lord reaffirmed that. And so as of right now, I don't know if I'm always balancing it well, but I'm trying my best to stay grounded in being present to what's most important each day, and then trusting God with the rest, because I can get very, what's the right way to say it? I can try to make things happen and feel like everything's on me. And I talk about striving versus surrender in This Dream Is Not For You. And I can very easily get to a striving place where I feel like I'm having to spin all these different plates. And I think in this season, God is just calling me to, yes, work hard, but then to rest and to trust that He has us exactly where He wants us. And so for people who feel scattered and they feel torn, I think there is wisdom in stopping and saying, hey, how much of this stuff do we actually have to do? And how much of this actually leads me and our family towards what's most important? Like, can you clarify in this season, these are the goals that we have for our life and for our family, or for our ministry, or for our finances? Have you done the work to stop and ask God what He wants, to have conversations with people that you trust? And once you get clarity on what those goals are, then, and those priorities are, does everything in your life lead in that direction? Because that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in the Steadfast Way, is getting clarity around those priorities. Because if you don't know where you're trying to end up, you're not going to like where you end up going. You're usually, your default actions and your default, the way you spend your time usually will not lead you to where you really want to be. You have to be intentional about that, and intentional about the practices and the priorities that lead you in that direction.
How often do you feel like you need to take time to reevaluate?
I mean, I think I'm constantly trying to figure that out for us. I think there's a daily surrender that happens. But I think if I'm in a good rhythm, I'd love to have almost like a half day to a day a month where I'm just trying to get away with God. But I think quarterly is a really great time frame to build goals and initiatives, saying, this is what I'd like to see in the next 90 days. Yes, you have your year goal, your 3-year goals, but then I think breaking those down into quarterly steps and action plans helps you know if you're moving in the right direction, and it gives you a chance to tweak and to adjust. So yeah, I would say there's different ways to stop and to pause, and different rhythms of that. But I mean, God can change your direction whenever He wants to. He doesn't always abide by our personal disciplines and rhythms and what He's going to speak. But I think when we do those things, it helps us slow down enough to tune our hearts to actually hear His voice and be more aware of what He might have been saying all along that we've just refused to listen to.
That's really good. A few minutes ago, you talked about your book and how we have the striving self and the surrendered self. And I feel like your pivot practices that you put in the book are things that I'll keep going back to and be like, oh, I'm going into striving. I need to just surrender this to God. And your book, though, has actually been out like a year now. We celebrated a year of it being out on the shelves September. So that's very exciting. And, that message, I know you've gotten a lot of people who have read the book and sent you a text or a message on Instagram or whatever, just saying how it helped them in a really hard season. So what are your thoughts moving forward? Do you have another book that you want to write? Do you have a message that's kind of stirring in your heart? Because I know when you go out, it does really seem like a lot of people had your book helped them release their dream and give it back to God instead of holding on tight to it.
Yeah, I mean, even before talking about the next book, I think it's been interesting, you and I walking through living out the message of this book in this season, because even just yesterday, you and I were kind of on our knees in the living room, praying through some uncertainty, praying through some things that have been really hard to surrender to God. And we've had a couple moments like that this year of weighing like a lot of focus and vision and clarity in one hand, and a lot of confusion and disappointment and unmet expectations in another. And so I think this has been a year of God saying, okay, you wrote a book about it, but will you actually live it out? And can you trust me with the dreams that still might seem out of reach? And I think that's been an interesting lesson to relearn after releasing a book on it. Mm-hmm. Which kind of makes me a little nervous about what do I write the next book about. And
even that, I really want to learn another lesson.
And even that, there've been so much encouragement about the book and in the podcast, but there were still and I did a whole episode about this recently, so many hopes and dreams I had for it that didn't work out. And so there's probably some hesitancy in my heart to want to go through that process again, because the insecurity in me is well, nobody really wants to hear what you have to say. Even though that's not true. I feel like God's given me a voice to speak into a certain group of people. And so I think I've been battling some of that. I call it oh, I'm not sure what I want to write about next, but some of it's just insecurity. But I think there's something in what we're doing with the Steadfast way that feels like that could be the thing for the next book. To answer your question, I would love to write another one. I enjoy writing. But I think there's so many of the things that I was passionate about in Ministry at Elevation, and so many of the things I'm passionate about here is helping leaders build a personal and a private life that actually fuels what they do publicly. And I think my story, and you saw it firsthand, was seeing a lot of quote unquote ministry success, but for a season feeling really empty and feeling anxious and lost and confused, that it didn't feel the way I thought it would feel. And God using me embracing discipline and rhythms to really create the space for him to change my heart and my soul and to renew my joy. And so what we've been able to walk through as a family and in our marriage and with our kids, I think that's the thing that I'm so passionate about. And I think that's probably where I'd want to write next is, how did God renew that in our life, and how can he renew it in someone else's?
Well, you keep bringing up the Steadfast way, so I guess we should ask some questions about that. So I love your heart with this. I've heard you kind of tell some of the men you're trying to help them build a private life that will support their public platform. And I think that's something we really need. Like there's a lot of people who are serving and doing ministry, but they're not taking the time to work on themselves or work on their family or put their heart in the right place. They're just always doing the outward stuff. So I love that you have tried to start making a group that can really help these men. So tell us some more about the Steadfast Way, and just, is there something that really inspired you to create it, or was it just something gradual, or what impact do you hope that this will have on the men who are going to join it?
Yeah. And not even trying to make this podcast a commercial about the Steadfast Way. It's just, it really is the thing that we talk about the most when it comes to ministry right now. And I even told you the other day, it's like, man, I feel like I have so much clarity right now on what I'm supposed to do. And a lot of it's centered around this. I think I learned, I didn't expect to enjoy coaching as much as I did when I stepped into this season 3 years ago. And I love it. I really love helping ministry leaders not just build a healthy culture on their team, but build a healthy culture in their heart and in their family. And just trying to think of if I'm just doing one-on-one coaching, I can only do that for a few people. So how can I do that for more? But then also I had a conversation with 2 men that I really respect earlier this summer. And both of them were like, I feel really lonely. And they lead large growing ministries. But because they lead these ministries and a lot of their friends are coworkers or maybe even report to them, they don't feel like they have other men that they can truly be open and honest with about some of the struggles that they deal with in ministry, and then also how that affects their family. So that was kind of happening on one side. And then when I took about 6 weeks off from social media this summer and was just praying and fasting and just asking God like for vision, I felt like this idea for the Steadfast Way was born. And so we launched it, I think 8 weeks ago, and it's been steadily growing. And just what I'm loving so much is the community that's being built with these guys. Cause it's not like they're just to learn from me. I share something every week with them, a framework or something that they can implement, but then to see them being open and vulnerable and challenging each other. And we hold each other accountable daily in the Slack channel with these certain metrics to see if we're actually making progress and growing. And some of the guys were at our house recently for the Steadfast Way, and like just to see what the Lord did in their lives, it really, really inspired me. I feel like more men in ministry need a place like that. And so I think it's given us greater vision for what that can become. And even like distilling so many of the things that we've talked about on the podcast into a framework of what it means to build a steadfast life, a life that finishes well, a life that is fruitful. And just, I'll even share like the 5 main pillars that we talk about in the Steadfast Way. There's the steadfast soul, which is really prioritizing, we call it the pillar of devotion, but prioritizing your relationship with the Lord as the center of your life, your family, your leadership. Then we have steadfast sight, which is the pillar of presence. And that's focusing on what's most important right now in the moment, usually the people that are right in front of you, your family. But also, are you present to yourself and what you need? Are there things that you do that fuel your soul that you enjoy? Then there's steadfast strength, which is the pillar of resilience. And that's just building physical and mental strength so that you can face the demands of leadership. So are you training your body? Are you training your mind? There's steadfast stewardship. How are you multiplying what God is entrusting to you? So it's the pillar of responsibility. So do you know what your most important priorities are at work, and are you making a plan to execute on that? And then also, are you encouraging other people in their calling and helping them flourish? And then finally, there's steadfast standards, which is the pillar of integrity, which is, are you living a life that is consistent in how you behave privately and publicly? So are you consistent? Are you courageous when things get hard? So those are the pillars that we're building on. And I think when I look at what builds a life on a strong foundation on Christ? How do we actually build healthy rhythms to live out a gospel-centered life? I think it's those 5 main areas.
Yeah. Um, let's highlight a couple of those. The steadfast soul one, I know that that's like spending time with God daily. So what does that look like for you personally? And when you're busy, like if you're traveling, how do you keep that up? Because I know that you're going to have a lot of men who are business leaders who are their day doesn't look the same every single day. So what does that look like for you? And just how do you, I guess, adapt it when you're in a really busy season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that some seasons I feel like I'm doing really well in it, and other seasons not so much. But I like the word rhythm when I talk about any kind of spiritual practice, because I think a rhythm implies that there's a set priority, but it can shift in practice depending on what's going on and change in a different season. And so there have been seasons over the last couple of years where I'm trying to pray an hour every morning. And we've talked about that on the podcast. But then there have been seasons where it's like 10 minutes in the morning and I try to break it up throughout the day. And then there are days where I don't really do well about it at all. But I'm learning how to give myself grace when those moments happen, but not licensed to stay in those moments, but to continue to try to exercise that muscle and prioritize that rhythm. So for what it looks like right now, I've talked about the RISE method here on the podcast. So I try to take about the first 45 minutes to an hour of my morning, and I try to resist my phone, to stay away from my phone, except if I might use it for like Lectio 365. I try to inspect my heart. So there's a lot of journaling that's involved with that, of like, God, this is where my heart's at this morning. I try to set my focus on the word of God. My guitar is right over there. A lot of times I'm picking up my guitar and I'm just playing some old 90s worship songs. And then the E for the RISE method is encourage your people. And that's trying to encourage one person with a scripture or a prayer, just through a text or a voice message each morning. But sometimes I do that, most of that on a prayer walk. It's getting a little colder in the mornings now, so I'm doing it more here. But I can do all 4 of those things in 5 minutes. I can do them in an hour. It depends on what, if I, like you said, if I'm traveling, if I'm home. I think the important thing is that I'm creating space to meet with God, to put my focus on him, to hear from him, and to set my priorities aligned with his priorities. Now, I really do like trying to have touch points throughout the day where I might pray the Lord's Prayer, or I might just stop and say, God, help me to recenter my heart and my trust on you. And so I'm trying to teach the guys in the Steadfast way, it's not so much the amount of time, it's that you actually prioritize some time in the day. So we hold each other accountable in 2 practices daily. Are you finding time to pause and align your heart with God, apart from like, not just when you're trying to prep a sermon or do a teaching, because most of the guys are in ministry, but is pausing a priority for you? And then the other one is praise. So is there some type of gratitude practice? You don't have to play the guitar to do it, but gratitude journaling, just 5 things that you're grateful for that day. I find that those 2 practices, they can look a lot of different ways, but if you're incorporating both of those into your daily rhythms, it helps bring me more peace. It helps me look for the way God is moving and look for the ways God's inviting me into his work.
Yeah. And the gratitude thing, I mean, there's like a lot of research about if you start your day off with gratitude, that it actually does change your brain. So God knew what he was what he was telling us to do. It was good for us to be doing it, not just trying to whatever. But
you heard it here first, folks. Be grateful.
Be grateful. Well, definitely love the soul. And I do feel like your thing on encouraging someone else, I think a lot of times I will sometimes be like, oh, no one's like said they're praying for me or reached out to me. And it's such like a just pivot, like your pivot
Hmm.
practice, just pivot it and reach out to someone else. Like, what is the thing that you wish someone would say to you? Well, why aren't you saying that to someone else? And so I think that's a really great handle. And if you can start your day off with that, like giving and
Hmm.
telling someone else, what God's put on your heart about them, I think sets your day in a much better place too. So,
Yeah, it takes your
um,
focus away from what you need to what you can give.
yeah, I love that. Let's focus on one more of your pillars, and then you'll have to join the Steadfast way to go in depth with everything else. But you have another one that's or not the pillar, the Steadfast strength. I don't know what you call that pillar. Pillar of resistance?
Resilience.
Resilience. Um, so I want to highlight this one because we have had so many conversations about importance of physical strength, mental health. You cold plunge. You got me somehow to cold plunge. You're always working out. You watch so much of like our entire YouTube history is just literally like people working out and talking about the science behind cold plunging and all this stuff. So I know you're very focused on this and into this. So how has this kind of changed your life a little bit? Like, I feel like that wasn't our history on YouTube probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So what's your heart with that? How does it play into your spiritual life? And what kind of surprises you that you've learned in that journey?
Yeah, our my YouTube history and algorithm has moved from a lot of Star Wars and Marvel stuff to now a lot of cold plunging, resistance training, a lot of Andrew Huberman, Peter Attia, Rhonda Patrick. So many people that I think bore you to death when I'm listening to them. But
I like the highlights, but they will have some long podcasts. I mean, we're talking like an hour or more about just very scientific stuff. So I get your condensed version, and I love that.
so there's a couple of different reasons why it's helped me. Number one, I think in general, discipline's contagious. And if you are focused in one area of your life and disciplined in that area, it bleeds into other areas. So I find that I'm actually much more consistent in my prayer life if I'm consistent with eating a healthy diet or consistent in working out. I just think it all feeds each other. And I think our life in God isn't compartmentalized. So I think the way I steward my body is an act of worship. The way I steward my mind is an act of worship. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Plus, I believe that I bring my best to you and to the girls when I'm at my best in terms of my health, when I actually feel like I have energy. We went for years where I ate like a 5-year-old and like Krispy Kreme was my favorite thing in the world. And as much as I love a good Krispy Kreme hot glazed donut, when I go down that road too much, I just feel sluggish. I don't feel good. So yeah, getting those practices in check has just made me a better version of me that I can bring to you and to the girls and to what God's called me to. And so cold plunging is just another way. It helps me with my mood. I just feel more focused. I feel like it helps build resilience. I hate the cold, but I've come to love how I feel after I do that. And if you want all the research on all that stuff, put it in the comments. I'll put a bunch of links to different videos you can watch. But to me, it really does. As somebody who can struggle with feeling anxiety and worry, it's just a way that I can use something natural to help get my mind in a place where I feel like I'm just more even keel. And so it's fun for us to do together. You might not have liked it at the beginning, but I think you think it's fun now, maybe.
Maybe
Although yesterday I
the
was like,
jury's
hey,
out.
yesterday I did ask you if you wanted to go plunge and you're like, I'm not there today. So I didn't push it.
It probably would have helped me get over my mental state, but yeah, I was not there. Um, But it has been a fun, I mean, we have some good memories of being out there in January and February when it's freezing cold and shivering in front of our gas fireplace. So it's really brought us together.
It has. The family that plunges together stays together.
That's so true. I do think we have, or at least I have some, or both of us do have some family history of some stuff like that could be passed down. And so a lot of this stuff we've done at least some research, and it should help us in the long run. And I think as we get a little bit older, we're starting to go, we want to have the energy and the mental capacity to really enjoy our later years with grandkids. And so I think you have to put in that work now in order to be able to enjoy those later years. Because if you don't, it's too late.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think even going back to like the physical discipline question of exercise and things like that, I think if you dig down to find the right why, it helps you be consistent with things longer. So if it's just how I look, that might get you so far. But I think that one of the switches that flipped for me when it was like, man, I want to be around to enjoy my grandkids and to be able to play with my grandkids. And when I started to think of it in terms of, I feel like I can attach this now to loving my family well, not just now, but 20 years from now, then it helps me adopt healthier rhythms now when it's not just about me, but it's about someone else. So yeah, that's been a helpful thing for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Well, speaking of our family, we obviously have 3 amazing girls. And I know you love being their dad and they love you being their dad as well. So how has being a dad changed how you view the world? How has like even all the different seasons of being, we've had babies and now we're in the teenage years. We're talking about colleges and careers, and it's just a new season. So what's something that you hope they remember the most about growing up having you as their dad, or what kind of legacy are you hoping to leave with them?
Oh man, if I think about this too much, I'll start to cry. I'm the one who would cry out of the two of us talking about this.
Probably, yeah. Well, even when our kids are starting, we have moments where they're gone, and I'm like, oh, this is a taste of, when they're out of the house, and you're like, don't even talk about it. I can't do it.
I mean, being a dad is my absolute favorite. And I would say, every season, I feel like every season has its own challenges, but every season also we say is our favorite. So as you get to, just getting to see your kids start to walk in the fullness of who God's called them to be, and having a more, like a deeper relationship with them. I want them to say, and this is kind of going back to the private public thing that we've talked about, I would want them to say that you and I both lived out privately what we taught others publicly. I would want them to say, hey, Dad didn't always have all the answers. He didn't get everything exactly right. But I know he loved Jesus. I know he loved us. And I saw a real picture of authentic faith and integrity. I want them to have that model for their future husbands, for their lives, that you can bring your questions, you can bring your whole heart, the messiness of your life to Jesus, and he can handle all of it. And he is always trustworthy and always worth every ounce of our lives. So I want them to see a picture of the Father's love for them, the Father's perfect love for them. I want them to get a glimpse of that through my very imperfect love. Um, so yeah, that's what
Yeah.
comes to mind.
Well, I feel like they feel so loved by you. And especially we have all girls. So having their dad just pour out love, tell them they're beautiful, I feel like is so important. And you do that so, so well. And I feel like you do a great job of trying to like carve out time with each one individually. And one of the things that you've been doing is taking them on trips with you to go like preach or consult at different churches. And I feel like they have thought that that has been so fun. Sydney's crocheting while you're
Yeah.
doing a teaching with a team, and but then they
We,
come
we
back
spent
just
that
so
one,
excited.
we spent that one weekend in Amarillo where I had to preach and also do a team night for the worship team. And she was trying to crochet something for you and your birthday. And she left something at home. So in between all that, I was driving her to like 3 different craft stores in Amarillo trying to find this one specific type of yarn that she had to have. But now it's a good memory now.
You did it. Yeah, you did it.
But no,
Well,
they love like the fact that they have you as their mom to help them process all the emotions that they process as a girl is just,
there's
and the way you're able to patiently walk them through that is like, I'm amazed every time I witness it. So,
there's a lot of conversations in our house, long conversations. They
mhm.
can talk. They can definitely
And
tell a story,
it's always at night.
always at night. You'll be like, let's go to bed at, 9:30, 10, and then I'm still talking to them 11:30. And but those are even moms I talk to, I'm just like, just let them talk at night. Like, I don't know what it is, but every kid, it seems like that's when they open up. So just be
Yeah.
there to listen. Well, one thing though that I wanted to touch on before we kind of, I guess, start wrapping up, but with talking about the girls going on these trips with you, I feel like you have a very unique perspective than some other, people in ministry, because you're getting to see a lot of different churches and how they're handling different things. So what's some of like the things that you have loved to see in churches as you've been traveling? You're consulting with worship teams, you're preaching, you're just coaching different people, and you're getting to visit all these different places. So kind of what's your thoughts on that?
I'm seeing such a heart. It's funny. I can hear our girls walking in right now from school,
And they
and
might show up in
they're
my
probably going to
background
show
too.
up in the shot. So this is real life. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll get to see it all.
Let's see.
I'm waiting to see if they're going to show up, or maybe they
They're
figured
going
out.
very slow and quiet. I hear whispers.
Um, well,
Right.
now they're avoiding us.
Oh, I saw a little head poke out right there.
Um, well, to answer the question, I feel like there's so much hope for the church right now. I'm seeing so many young leaders who are tired of trying to just copy what they see other churches do. They're tired of trying to be cool, and they want to serve Jesus and they want to love people well. And I'm seeing, we're recording this on election day, but I'm seeing so many young leaders really try to be faithful to how do I lead with conviction and stand on the truth of God's word and disciple people and teach them like this is what it means to have a Christian worldview. But then at the same time, really try to hold and balance how do I love people and be compassionate towards people. So holding conviction and compassion both tightly, that really encourages me. And I'm seeing a lot of people say, I really want to finish well. I really want to be faithful to Jesus. I want to be faithful to my wife. I want to be faithful to my family. And seeing that hunger in these leaders gives me so much hope for the church. And now I feel like I'm at the age where I can be like a fatherly role to a lot of these leaders. And I'm seeing worship teams, because I do a lot with worship teams, really like no longer seeing the pinnacle of success of, we've got to release an album and we have to have this platform on Instagram. I'm seeing more teams say, no, I just want to faithfully shepherd the people at this church. And I love that. I love helping come alongside churches and build that culture. So yeah, I know there's a lot of bad press about, this problem or that problem in the church. And yes, we need to continue to work to present the church as a pure bride before Christ and to really lead it well and be a city on a hill. But I see so many leaders right now in churches really wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like you have worked with some really, really awesome churches. I've gotten to visit a few, the girls have, and they're awesome. So we've really enjoyed this season of getting to go and visit these different places. Well, it is about, that time to wrap it up. So I'll give one last question.
All right.
Just a little throwback. When I first met you, you were kind of like traveling around that Southeast, just, leading worship for church groups. And now this coming year, you actually got invited to preach in Taiwan. So that is a huge shift from, 20 something years ago to now. So God has definitely taken us on a really incredible journey. And so both of us, I know, are so thankful for the journey that God has brought us on. So I kind of think it would be fun to just, since I've known you since those days, if you could go back and give, younger Wade that one piece of advice, whether it's ministry, family, personal, whatever, what would you give young Wade as your piece of advice?
It's hard to distill it down to one thing. What comes to mind is enjoy the chapter that you're in. Or I would say this: find the good in the chapter you're in. Because I don't know if every chapter is enjoyable, but I think there's good in every chapter. So maybe that's it. Because I think so often I was always trying to get to the next thing that I never either enjoyed what I was doing or savored it or took time to say, God, where is the good in this that I can carry with me? I feel like I was always trying to get one step forward or to the thing that felt like that was going to fulfill me or that was going to be the dream, that I missed the dream that was this season. Mm-hmm. So I'll just say savor it, find the good in each season, and don't be so in a hurry to get to the next thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're doing a good job with that piece of advice right now?
Sometimes. Some days. I'm a work in progress.
Aren't we all? Well, I am so excited that you let me be on this podcast today and get to enjoy 100 episodes. Woohoo!
This was your interview to take over the next 100 episodes. So good job. You passed.
I think not. No, one of the things that I always say to other people is that with you doing this podcast, I didn't realize how great of an interviewer you were. And seeing you do it over and over, I'm just like, you ask the best questions. And so if you haven't listened, if this is your first episode that you've listened to, definitely go jump back and listen to a couple of the other ones that Wade has done, because he really does ask amazing questions. Oh. On that note, do you have maybe a favorite one or two podcasts that you've done on this journey, 100 in?
Oh gosh.
Someone, maybe you could link to it so someone could enjoy your favorite.
As soon as you ask that question, I feel like my mind goes blank of every podcast I've done.
I was like, who did I interview?
One of the ones that comes to mind is an earlier episode, but with Jonathan Moynihan. I really
was he one of the first?
He was one of the first interviews.
Yeah.
Might have been the first interview. So that's one of the ones that just comes to the top of my head. I've enjoyed interviewing you. I've had a lot of great.
Been the person who's come the most on your podcast.
That's
this
true.
Is what, third time? Three times now?
Third time.
Yep. Tiffany's is also a really sweet one. I loved her episode.
Tiffany's is really great too.
Yeah.
They're all great.
There's so many. Stephen Webb, he keeps it real in his podcast. There's so many great people on here. So thank you for letting me be part of it. And I'm excited to see what the next 100, like you said, there's people who have been on here 400, 500, 1,000. And so it'll be cool to see what God does as, you keep being faithful with this. And yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for interviewing me today. And it was fun. We'll do it. We'll do it again. 200 episodes.
Right, let's do it. And then let's go celebrate Sydney.
Well, now I'll take it back over. Thank y'all for joining us for Dreamers and Disciples today. Really grateful for everyone who subscribes, who listens, who shares. And I'd love to ask you on this 100th episode to do that if you haven't. Please subscribe so you'll be notified when a new episode comes out, and then share something that means something to you. You have no idea how God's going to use it in the life of someone else. So get the word out about the podcast. I'll see you back here next week for the next episode.